It's Vlogaday 589. Morning. It's Mercy Ships Monday. It's actually Sunday, but that's not how things work around here. And today I'm going to be talking about sailing. And when I say sailing, technically, there's probably some ship nerd out there who's like, nah. Technically, it's getting underway because there are no sails involved on the ship that I lived on. But nobody talks about getting underway, except occasionally. But for the most part, we're sailing. You're on a sail. It's like the noun and the verb. It's just what we used. Sailing. I love sailing. I actually just found out this morning that one of my best friends is going to be going back to the ship long term. Unfortunately, she will not be on the ship when we go to visit, which is sad. I was hoping that she would be. But I have a number of friends there, so that's just news that I found out this morning. My first experience sailing was in South Africa. Putting on my shoes and talking was a bad idea. The ship was in Durban, which we talked about last week when we talked about Applesbosch. But it was there to get new generators, help the electricity be a little bit more stable. They also upgraded the air conditioning, as I recall, which didn't go entirely to plan, which is something that I was gonna tell you about. Although I might wait till next week when we talk about Sierra Leone to tell you a little bit more about that, but it definitely caused some serious problems. Reverse progression on that. I'm gonna get cash preemptively because they don't have a card reader. Just in case you're gonna come to the Peloton, they don't have a card reader. Maybe by the time you see this they will, but probably not. So make sure you have cash when you come in. Ooh, it's cold. My first sail was just from Durban to Cape Town. We were testing the engines, making sure everything was working. We left really late. We were supposed to get like a whole week in Cape Town. It's one of the great bitter moments of my life, but it took them too long to get going. So we only got 24 hours in Cape Town. I just remember though, pulling out of Durban and going around in circles and looking at the satellite coordinates of the ship and how we were just pulling a bunch of random loops because they were testing the engines, but it just looked silly. It's like, well, we're already lost. That didn't take long. The sail down south around the Cape was pretty quick. Did get a little bit choppy at one point or another, but the ship we were on was a Danish rail ferry that had been refit into the hospital ship. So it wasn't really a ship that was designed to go out on the open ocean. It wasn't at all, actually. Success! I'm gonna have to pay for yoga this morning too, so cash is kind of important. If you go on a cruise ship, they have stabilizers built into the bottom of the ship that help it to stay very, very stable, even during choppy seas. But our ship did not have those things. It had like little ones, but they were made for like going between islands in Denmark, not for rounding capes and traversing the ocean. So we would list pretty well. When you list on a ship, it's when it tilts one way or the other. And I loved it. One of the other kind of, I guess, sadistic pleasures of sailing is that because a lot of people actually do get seasick when sailing, you know, with a bunch of people that aren't sailors, the ship gets really quiet because everybody's just lying down. So you have the whole place to yourself. It's just you and the ocean as it passes by. So our first trip was pretty quick. We pulled into Cape Town, docked, had 24 hours. I made sure to climb Table Mountain. I took a helicopter ride around the city. I did as much as I could within the short period of time that we had there. Went to the Royal Eatery Cafe, so good. And then set sail for Sierra Leone from there. All right, it's yoga time. The Kickstarter campaign is feeling very polished right now. I probably have a few more things that I can add as I go over it, and I'm sure that I'll make modifications over the course of the coming weeks, but feeling pretty ready. Just trying to actually follow my own advice in how I build it. And there's still a little bit more brainstorming to do to tighten up a couple of things, but otherwise, feeling good. So now we're gonna go do yoga with Natasha. I missed out last time because I was in Nice, which is a pretty good excuse, but no excuses this week. It's time to go sweat for an hour. She does a pretty intense one apparently. I don't know, I have nothing to compare it to. I have no other yoga experience, but apparently hers it's a good workout. So Cape Town was sad. We got a really nice berth. We were very close to the end of the port. And that's one of the interesting things about living in a port is that you kind of judge your berth based on the walking distance that it leaves you with to get out of the port. At least that's how a lot of us looked at it. A good berth in a port meant that you only had a short walk, but ports can be huge, and they have to be to accommodate massive ships, especially massive container ships. So you could actually end up walking a good couple of miles within the port just to get out of the port. Which means if you want to go out to dinner or something like that, hopefully you can hitch a ride to get out. Because there were some of the ports that we ended up in that we had a really, really long ways to go. Genuinely miles. That adds something to the night, especially coming back and walking into the port. Oof. But in Cape Town, like I said, we had a really, really nice spot. We were able to get in and out very easily. And then we took off. Sailing from Cape Town to Freetown, Sierra Leone was, I believe, a 15-day sail. And in the process, we crossed the equator, which was really exciting because that is how I went from being a slimy pollywog to being a trusty shellback, all within the span of effectively my second sail. I hope it's warm in there because I'm frozen. Ooh. Anyways, I know you're not supposed to have coffee before yoga, I guess, but it was too good to say no to. Hey, how's it going? Feels great. Feel really good after that. My whole body just feels like it melted a little bit. Thanks, Natasha. It was really good. I didn't film much inside this time because I didn't really know anybody in there. Last time I knew a lot of people that were in there, and this time not so much. So, and one of them specifically said she really didn't want to be filmed. So I was like, oh, I mean, there's a good chance I can just film myself, but I don't want to take the risk. So you'll just have to imagine that it was relaxing and challenging all at the same time. I'm gonna go over to the Bastille Market. Hopefully it's still going. Grab myself a little bit of something to eat and then get back to it is currently my plan. Where were we? With, oh yeah, shellback, becoming a trusty shellback. It's a naval tradition that when you cross the equator, you participate in ceremonies that take you from being a slimy pollywog, in other words, somebody who's yet to be initiated, into trusty shellback. Now, if you're in the US Navy or Merchant Marines or any real Navy, there's a good chance that they're going to humiliate the heck out of you for an entire day to make you cross that line. Thankfully, I was with a charity organization that wasn't all about that. And so our rituals involved, you know, like limbo, I don't remember what all, eating something gross, but nothing nearly as gross as if we were something. I know a lot of people that have done horrible, horrible things to become shellbacks. So thankfully we didn't have to do that. But the idea is basically that you enter the order, it's a rite of passage when you're crossing the equator. And later I would become a Royal Diamond shellback, which is an entirely different distinction. But I'll tell you about that after I find the King Falafel, because that's what I'm after. Oh yeah, and they're still open, excuse me. I got my shawarma. I was gonna get falafel, but then I saw that they had shawarma, and so I figured I'd go for that. We'll see how it is. First bite, mostly bread. It's tasty for a street shawarma. It's really interesting too because it's filled with hummus as well. It's a little garlicky, but not very. That's the only downside. Very tasty. I like those guys. They're really nice. So a Royal Diamond shellback is when you cross at 0-0. There are a couple different orders. You become a shellback when you cross the equator and go through the ceremonies. Whatever those ceremonies are. They're mysterious. You shouldn't know too much about them before you go through them. You become a Royal Diamond shellback when you cross at 0-0, so the equator and the prime meridian. When you cross the equator at the international date line, you enter the Order of the Golden Dragon, which is actually a lot more common because there's a lot of shipping that goes across the Pacific. Whereas becoming a Royal Diamond shellback or an Emerald shellback, depending on which Navy you're in or however you align yourself, is significantly more rare because there's just not that much traffic that goes around the west coast of Africa. So crossing at 0-0 or the prime meridian in the equator just doesn't happen very often, which makes me a sort of nautical novelty, I suppose. I'm on the rare side of things. Going for a stroll with these hooligans. So enjoy some shots of Paris, and then I'll tell you about pirates. Pirate Watch. It's a thing that I've had to do more than once.
Proper Tash.
I promised you pirate stories. We had a pint and I came home. We were gonna have a crepe. I wasn't hungry yet for the crepe. I came home and now I got back to work and now I'm sitting down. So pirate stories, but also just some kind of general observations when sailing. There's just so many interesting stories and I just don't have time for it. Pirate watch. Certain countries whose coastlines we would go along had a little bit of a pirate problem. And I can tell a number of different stories along those lines. Pirate watch is basically a volunteer position where a number of us would take a watch and we would be positioned around the ship with night vision goggles and we would literally be watching for anybody trying to approach the ship so that we could warn the captain and hopefully, handle it before anybody actually boarded us. There were problems with that. We never had pirates actually come onto the ship. Stowaways occasionally, but not pirates, thankfully. Even though while we were in Togo, we saw other ships had like razor wire around their hull and big signs saying we have guns and we will shoot you, that kind of stuff. So thankfully it was never quite that intense for us. But we did spend a lot of time out, like late at night. Some of the coolest things were like when you're out late at night and it's clear, you'd see the stars so perfectly. And because there's a little bit of mist in the air all the time when you're on the ocean, my buddy Kyle would come out with a laser pointer. He had a really strong laser pointer and he was a huge fan of the constellations, really knew the constellations well. And he'd stand out there and the laser pointer, because you could see the laser going through the mist, it looked like he was actually able to touch the stars. And so he was able to point out individual constellations or stars, planets, whatever, and tell us what we were seeing. I just have a lot of really fond memories of the captain coming out as well. You saw Captain Tim very briefly on my trip to Wales. When I went to my friends Anna and Theo's ceremony, it wasn't really a wedding, but kind of a wedding ceremony. Captain Tim would stand with us out on the deck and talk to us about his experiences sailing. He would point out stars as well and talk about different wildlife he had seen on the ocean, different experiences he had had. It was always really, really neat. You would be able to see like the trail at night. You would have bioluminescence behind the ship as the propellers churned things up and you'd be able to see it behind us, and it was just incredible. Wildlife, of course, we'd see dolphins and whales, flying fish, which I totally thought were not real until I was on the ocean, and we would see flying fish every time we went out, which was really, really neat. I just have a lot of really, really fun memories from sailing, and I really, really loved being out on the ocean for 2 weeks at a time. A lot of people couldn't really handle that. I thought 2 weeks was perfect because it gave you the perfect amount of time where it forced you to kind of relax. You couldn't get off the ship, you couldn't go do anything. You got your work done, and then you just chilled. I really liked that. I also really liked, this is in my book, in Agnar's box, because they're on a ship in Agnar's box, but I make reference to the fact that when the ship is always moving, your brain is constantly working to balance you out. Your body's doing a lot of extra work to balance, and you stop realizing that pretty quickly, but your body is still working. And so when you go to bed every night, you are wiped. And it's an amazing feeling because you're just exhausted and ready to go to bed every night. And I loved it. Oh man, and having the ship rock you to sleep every night. Oh, so good. Anyways, those are some of my stories from sailing. I have a lot of stories from sailing, but I just thought I would talk a little bit about that before we go to the ship in April. For those of you who are new to the channel, you might not know that I'm going to be going to Cameroon in not too long. And actually, spoilers, surprise, my friends Susan and Gary, who are some of the longest running Mercy shippers I know, are in town. I didn't know that, and they asked if they could take me to lunch tomorrow, which I'm never going to say no to. So I'll be going and hanging out with them tomorrow as well, which is really, really exciting. So I'm looking forward to seeing them. Anyways, I'm going to pack it in for the night. I'm going to put this on the computer, edit, and go to bed. It's my plan. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe. I'd love to see you around more regularly. I, of course, am here every day making another stupid video, literally every day. And I would love to share my stupid videos with you. And that's all I got. Good night.